Hey everyone, I need your advice. I'm struggling with a very unique gardening challenge, and any advice that I could get is going to greatly be appreciated. You may have seen in some of my past videos the unique challenge that I'm having in my garden. What we're trying to do here is raise our own food, milk our own cows, and even grow our own food. But when it comes to growing our own food, we have a super hard time in the position that we're at. So I may live in Tennessee where we can grow many different things, and pretty decently at that, but I live on this hill. And this hill has caused massive erosion over many years, creating this spot that I'm living on. Not all hills are this way, but specifically my hill has turned into a cedar glade. That means that the soil erosion has caused so much soil depletion in this area that we basically don't have any soil to grow on. A lot of the spots right here where my garden is a very shallow depth. Most of this on this cedar glade is limestone. So the plants are, well, at least some of these big trees are able to find ways through some of these limestone rocks, but not all of it is limestone. A lot of this is almost like bedrock right underneath our feet. There are parts on this property where I can dig maybe a forearm length, but that's it. Most of the other spots that I'm dealing with won't even go in past my hand. If I could dig as deep as my hand, that would be actually a good thing in most of these spots. But I can't even effectively get a T-post in many different spots. Let me show you. This is about as far in as I could get this T-post, not even to the recommended length here to actually get it to hold in, and it is pretty wobbly. And if we see right here, this is even worse. This is even worse, and it's being braced by this bar. You may say, why not just do raised garden beds? Now, I am doing some raised garden beds, and those are doing fine, but it is a lot of work to fill in what's a quarter of an acre of garden beds and then get enough fill material to fill every one of those garden beds. It's just so much work to even try to do that. Not to mention how expensive it is to get this many garden boxes in. We've tried to be clever in making garden boxes out of stone. We've also gotten a lot of free logs to bring in, but we're using those logs not just for garden beds, we're using them for erosion control on our cedar glade hill. Now bear with me as I show you some of these areas because they were not super well maintained, and that's because I just didn't get a proper yield on anything and I had a lot of problems growing. So I just kind of let the weeds get to it as it did. But we were also in a massive drought this year, which actually led for me not to have to weed so much because nothing was growing. And then all of a sudden, tons of rain happened and everything took over. So that's where we're at. Let me show you my flower garden. So this flower garden was super awesome about 2 weeks ago, and then the rain finally hit and everything got taken over. This side we've been able to manage a little bit more, but with the lack of water and how many weeds there were, it got to be pretty unmanageable. But like I said, our raised beds are looking great. This is our Brussels sprouts, and they've taken off. They look really good. Here's our loofah. Our loofah has taken off. Like I said, we were in a drought, and most of this down here is watered by rain. So I don't have to worry too much about watering all the time. And with the overabundance that we put of wood chips, it's been pretty great, except for this year. Also, a lot of our garden is run off of rain catchment. So I have a water system running down here, and it has a very high water pressure because of how high up our house sits on that hill. And it brings all the water down here, and I can water our entire garden strictly off rainwater. But without rain, it actually caused a very big issue. This is inside of one of the raised beds, and just look at these peppers. They have produced so much. I've almost just given up picking them. I need to come down here and keep picking more, but they have given me so much. I think I have like 8 jars of canned peppers, which is amazing, and they're still producing. And all my basil has gone to seed. It's given me so much. This has all been great. This is all in the raised beds. Here is our potato box. This is actually working pretty well. We also have some citrus that are growing in pots that we're going to up pot this upcoming season because they're growing from right now and they need more space. And I've got this greenhouse that I really let get taken over by these tiny spoon tomatoes. I love them, they're so good. It's really pretty in here and I wasn't using this inside for anything else, so I just let this take over. And I let it take over so much it actually blew out one of the panels for the ceiling. I have some ideas for how to keep this thing warm so that I can keep growing during the winter, because even though this is a greenhouse, it's not heated. So during the winter, it does get very, very cold in here. And if it's freezing outside, it will be freezing in here during the nighttime, especially if it's cloudy outside. But that's for a future project, which you can also give your input in, but we'll show that in another video. So make sure you subscribe to figure out what we're gonna do inside of here. I know it's incredibly overgrown, but you know, it just is really pretty having all this here. I love it. Now I like the raised bed method and I may eventually, I might have to go that route, but I'm trying everything I can not to, because I actually want to raise the soil level up here. I want to be able to grow in the ground. I want to have a variety of things that I can plant straight into the ground without having to go inside of those raised beds. Now, through a lot of wise advice, I think this was the best option for me. Now, it's because of cost and time. This may be the best way for me to achieve something like this. And overall, I think it'll give me the best benefits and best options. But it actually leads into the problem that I'm having that I need all of your help with. I brought in so much wood chips. This was all brought here for free by local arborists, and that's why we went this direction. So we've laid out all these rows of wood chips, very thick. We actually chose a few different methods when it came to planting in these wood chips. One of those methods was to lay wood chip piles straight on the floor, straight on the ground, and let them compost down a little bit. Then from there, we would dig a hole in the wood chip pile. Inside of that hole, we would put organic composted matter and then plant the seed or the plant directly there inside of the wood chips. Now, the problems that I'm going to show you that I have just could mainly be because the wood chips aren't old enough. I've heard that a lot of this method really takes about 3 years to really set in. This is my first year, so this upcoming year we're going to go on the second year. But I want to head this up and tackle these problems that I'm having before next year. I want your help so that next year I could get the best yield possible given the type of growing situation that I have. Now, some of the main problems that I have with this garden really could just be because these wood chips aren't old enough. Now, really, to try to address what's been going on in my garden, because this is really what I need help with the most. Now, I'm being very vulnerable here and showing you all these issues because I really need your help. And a lot of my tomato plants end up looking like this. This is pretty much the end of the season for these tomatoes anyway. They looked so green and lush, and they've all really gone to producing all this fruit instead of the green leaves. But this is inside of my raised bed. These have done awesome this year, even with very minimal amount of water, just like my wood chip garden over there, because I put wood chips on the top as a cover layer inside of this bed. As you can see here, this one also looks very bad, and I don't think it ever produced any fruit. I was going to start trellising a lot of them, and you'll see that I did start to trellis some of them with a stake in the ground, but I didn't really need to because a lot of them either shot up, never took on fruit, or never even did anything. So I didn't want to waste my time putting a bunch of work into these tomato plants if they weren't ever going to bear fruit. So you'll see, I should have trellised if they were going to bear fruit, but I just didn't want to waste the time. Now, some of these tomatoes started producing very small fruits. In fact, look at this one. I thought it was a weed for 2 seconds. This plant is pretty much what most of the tomatoes were looking like. So you can see they're very thin and there isn't very much of them. And this is why I never took the approach of trellising everything, because this is just what they looked like. But once the rain started and the weather started to cool down a little bit more, some of the plants started to do okay, and we're starting to get some fruit from them. I'm at the end of September right now, so I should have already had a pretty good harvest, but it just never came because a lot of the plants suffered so much inside of whatever I'm doing right here. Here's some Ace 55 tomatoes, which don't really need to be trellised because they're a bushing tomato. And you know, I put 10 of these. I think I only have 2 that survived. I don't know. I don't know what I did wrong. And that's why I just need your help. I want so many tomatoes next year. And like, this has just been the most abysmal year, period. And I know I'm doing things differently inside of wood chips. I want to stick to this method, I think. But I really need help, and what I could do to help these tomatoes in the future, because I know that wood chips steal a lot of nitrogen, so I have been putting a lot of organic matter and a lot of feed inside of these tomatoes just to make sure that they do survive through whatever breakdown is happening with the wood chips. But I'm still having so many problems. What's nice is that some of these are actually starting to take off. I just noticed this one right now because I haven't been down here in a little bit. This one has some fruit that's on here, and I need to get it up and off of the ground so that this fruit isn't touching the ground. But right next to it, look at this, totally dead. And this is what most of them were looking like, completely dead. Now, not everything did terrible in this method, because you could see a lot of this holy basil. It did spring up and take off, but you know, it had the problem of being very delayed despite everything growing so quickly inside of my garden beds. And even right here with this melon, it's just stringy. It's stringy and it just didn't have enough nutrients. I don't know what happened, but this is about it. And then I may get flowers, but nothing more from it. There tend to be some hidden surprises among all this failure, to where I have some honeydew melons that are growing, and even some watermelon that has taken off. This one looks like poor pollination though, so I don't think that's gonna work. But there have been some little hidden surprises, like this tiny little, I took it off on accident, but this tiny little cantaloupe. Smells good. There's a few more in here. We even have an okay sized watermelon, but there's only one here. I have another mound this direction, which did much better, and the weeds took it over very quickly here. I didn't have enough wood chips at the time to fill in the rows to keep the weeds down from the rows. So as soon as the rain came back, they started to take off. So let me show you this, and I'll describe the difference of what I did in this wood chip row that made this one a lot more successful. So in this wood chip row here, there is, again, a lot of wood chips. In this wood chip pile, I didn't dig holes, put organic matter in that hole, the size of the root ball pretty much, that the plant's gonna overtake. What I did is I laid a foundation of very decomposed cow manure that I got from a local farmer. His hay piles were huge. It was organic hay, unsprayed hay, mixed with composted horse manure. No, sorry, not horse manure, I mean cow manure. And that cow manure was all throughout here. And these beds did a lot better than the beds that were just wood chips with a hole dug in the middle. This gave me a lot better results. I had some issues because it has been so droughty. Because it's not just strictly wood chips, the moisture level in here wasn't able to be maintained so strictly. So I do see a huge benefit with a heavier layer of wood chips in the fact that basically even during a drought, I barely had to water at all. You can see in this row, there's a ton of a specific type of huckleberry that is very good, and you know, I'm probably not going to plant it again next year, but it produced so much. I need to come in here and pick all this up. And even all the watermelons and cantaloupe that I planted in this row did so well. Now I would potentially like to do this for all of my rows, but getting all of that manure over here with that big Rudd truck I have is a little bit difficult. So I need to figure out a different path on how to do it. It seems to me that the wood chip rows on the other side had a hard time giving enough nutrients over to the plants. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it really seems that way, especially because in these piles that were specifically composted hay and manure, they were able to give a lot more nutrients to the plants, obviously because there's so much more in there, and they were able to produce so much more. But again, it's a lot of work bringing all of this stuff in and over here. Also, I have cows, and I am slightly worried that any runoff that comes from the garden itself into the fields could potentially be contaminated with something called yonis or anything else. So I'm being very cautious about the type of manure that I'm bringing in, because I don't want to bring disease onto my farm in trying to get my garden to work really well. Here's a bunch of Jerusalem artichoke, and these did so well inside of the wood chip mounds, but when it came to the drought, they did not do as well, because over here it is that organic cow manure and compost and a bunch of other stuff that I mixed into here, but it's not strictly wood chip. So when it came to the drought, they didn't maintain moisture as much as I needed them to. So you could see a lot of this is because of dry spouts that were going on and me not being able to get any water over here to this part of the garden. But despite that, they've grown really well. I would say very well. Here's another wood chip mound that we have, but this one is designed specifically for next year. Inside of here is a bunch of compost and a bunch of cow manure and spent hay. And it's been sitting here specifically so that next year I could do it. There has been a lot of weeds right here because we haven't had enough time to come down here and weed everything. And when I found that when I bring cow manure or compost, sometimes there's a lot of weeds in it because it's been sitting around for so long, and weeds either get blown in or transferred through the cows. It's a little bit difficult, but I do want to save this for next year. It really wasn't meant for this year, so you can see how overgrown it was. And I think this is going to be great, kind of like the last one I showed you with all of those huckleberries. But I can't do this for every single row because it's pretty difficult and expensive to try to get all of this organic material here. And as you could see, I have tons of wood chips, and I have a really awesome wood chip source that brings them all the time. So really, this is the method that I want to approach. And this should also be a proof of concept to revitalize my pastures since I'm on this cedar glade. It makes it really hard to grow anything anywhere, even in my fields. So what would you do in my position? Would you bring in a bunch of raised beds and try to find as much material as you can to build in raised beds, everything? Would you try to bring in dirt and soil, which can be very expensive, and put into the ground? Considering that I am approaching this through the wood chip method, what would you do to revitalize this for the most and best outcome for next year? Please help me out. All of your advice and all of your comments are welcomed. I so badly want to be able to grow as much food for my family and achieve our goal of a market garden, which is why I want to grow in such a large space. Considering the situation I'm in, this is a massive undertaking, but I think together, collectively, we can make this happen. Be sure to like and subscribe to see this process as it turns around. Right here, I'm linking a playlist to all the videos that I've posted in this series of where we have started for this garden, describing it a little bit more in detail of why we chose to do what we did, the 3 different methods. I've discussed them a lot more in detail, and I've even discussed a lot more about deciding about wood chips, because I know wood chips are a very hotly debated subject. I can't wait to hear some of your ideas and implement them into the garden.